Hello everybody and welcome to the Blackout mini hex build video. In this video I'll show you how to professionally build a Blackout mini hex. Brought to you by DroneWorksUSA.net. DroneWorks USA was created for individuals looking to buy the highest quality ready-to-fly aircraft they possibly can. Okay, now onto the build process. I'm going to show you how I took these and turned them into those over . Okay, to start off with, you gotta go to minihquad.com and buy your Blackout hex. Now if you notice, there's two options here. One is just a power distribution board and the hex frame, and the other one is the hex frame, power distribution board, motors, and ESCs. Okay, now that you got your frame, let's grab the rest of the components and start assembling it. Alright, the next thing we need to grab is the ESCs. I personally like to use T-Motor 12 amp ESCs. You can get these at DIYquadcopters.com. Now for the hard part, the choice in motors. If you plan on going 3-cell, I highly recommend the MN 1806 2300 kV Tiger motors. I personally like Blackout's custom all black versions of these motors. I think the all black versions of these motors make it look a lot cleaner. But that's my personal opinion. Now if you're choosing to go 4-cell because you're just one of those crazy power junkies, there's a couple motors you can actually choose. I personally chose the MN 2204 2300 kV motors. However, another option is the MN 2206 2350 kV motors. I'm sure these are great motors, however at this time I have not used them, so I can't really comment on them. Now if you've chosen to go 3-cell, you can run the Gem Fan 5x3 nylon props. These props come in a variety of colors and really do help add a little bit of bling to your aircraft. And to top it off, you can add these really cool anodized prop nuts. They also come in a variety of colors. Now if you're one of those crazy few who chose to go 4-cell, I highly suggest running these props. Okay, now that you got the first couple items, let's start assembling them. First, you're going to want to remove the sticker label off the outside of the shrink wrap. Then you're going to cut the shrink wrap off the ESC. Then you're going to take that same sticker and place it on top of the metal heatsink. Next, you're going to cut the ESC output wires so that they're really short and you can just tin the ends of them. Also, you're going to want to remove the black servo connectors from the ESCs because when you go to mesh wrap them and use a heat gun, they can melt. You also want to remove the positive and negative wires from 5 of the ESCs and just leave the signal wire. Leave the 6th ESC with all the wires because that ESC is going to be powering your flight controller and receiver. Now is a good time to mount all your motors to the arms. Now you can take your power distribution board out of the package and you'll notice that the power distribution board has some slight raised edges around it. Those you need to take a file and file down so that it looks like this one. Then you need to take a black permanent marker and go around the entire edge of the aircraft. This makes it look a lot more clean and it also helps the power distribution board blend more into the carbon fiber components. Next you're going to want to install 2 screws opposite each other into the arms to hold the bottom plate, arms, and power distribution board all together. You're going to want to tighten these down so that they're tight and the arms aren't flopping around. Next you're going to want to cut the motor wires so that they line up with the ESCs so that the ESC's capacitor sits basically flush with the edge of the power distribution board. But before you solder the motor wires to the ESC, make sure you add the black shrink wrap around the back 4 motors. Also make sure before you solder the motor wires to the ESC that you're soldering them in the right locations so that the motor will spin the right way according to the flight controller that you're using. Now would be the correct time to go back and put the heat shrink along with the heat sink on the ESCs. Then you can use your heat gun to shrink around the ESC and shrink around the motor wires. Now your aircraft should look a lot like this. Next you're going to want to cut to length the ESC power wires. Make sure you make them as short as possible so there's not a bunch of excess wire hanging all over the place. Yet, there's enough wire so that it lines up perfectly straight with the arm still. Once you figure out that wire's perfect length, cut it and solder it to the power distribution board. Now you're going to want to cut some small pieces of double-sided sticky tape and place it on top of the arm underneath each of the ESCs. Okay, now we're coming to the fun part, the LEDs. Actually, this is not fun really. It's actually the most painstakingly hard part of the build. But if you want to do it, you can do it. If not, you can just skip this part completely. Okay, first I'm going to show you how to install the brushed ESC so that you can control the brightness of your LEDs. So the first thing you're going to need to grab is this brushed ESC from Hobby King. Then you're going to want to grab the colored choice of LEDs that you want to use. Now you're going to want to cut the brushed ESC wires pretty short and line them up so that they can solder onto these tabs right here. Then you're going to want to feed the output wires of the brushed ESC through the bottom here. Now you need to cut 6 positive wires and 6 negative wires and solder them together just like this. Make sure that they're able to run all the way to where the LEDs will be going on the arms. This is really important to measure really carefully right here. It is also really important to note that you need to have enough extra wire to go around the outside of the arm because they can't shoot straight across the arm because the bottom plate is going to be there. So they need to feed around the side of the arm. Now that you got your 2 wire bundles built, you're going to want to solder them on to the output leads of the brushed ESC. Then you're going to want to slide some shrink wrap over all the wire bundles and heat shrink them down. Now is the time you can add the mesh wrap to the wires. Before you mesh wrap these wires together, it's very important that you find those same groups of 2 wires that run to the correct set of LEDs. If you mesh wrap the wrong set of 2 wires together, those wires are not going to reach the set of LEDs you're going to try to hook them to. Now is the time that you're going to peel and stick the LEDs to the arms. Make sure before you stick them onto the arms that the arm is clean and free of dust. If it has any stuff on the arms, the LEDs won't stick very well and they'll just peel off later. Also, you're going to want to make sure that the solder points for your LEDs is backed away enough from the edge of the frame. That way when you place the bottom plate on it, it won't hit where the LEDs are supposed to solder. If you want to have LEDs but you still don't want to have the brushed ESC to control them, you can make this style wire harness and basically just solder the ends to one of the power distribution tabs. Your LEDs will be on all the time if you do it this way. So if you don't mind that, then this is the way you're going to want to do it. Okay, so the next thing you're going to want to grab is a Team Black Sheep Core Plug and Play 50. The first thing you're going to want to do is open it up by removing 4 screws that hold the outer case together. Once you have that opened, you're going to want to solder the jumper tabs of the video transmitter and the camera both to 12 volts. If you're using the video transmitter and camera that I'll show you later on in the video. Now you're going to want to unsolder their wire harness and replace it with a much cleaner version like this. As you can see here, I have 2 negative wires instead of just 1 like their version. This allows you to mesh wrap both sides, the output and the input of the Team Black Sheep core. Now you need to solder the core's output wires to the 2 tabs I show you here. Okay, now let's solder up the flight controller. If you have a receiver that supports PPM and you're running the NASI32, I highly suggest just running the 1 PPM cable off the NASI32. It makes it look a lot cleaner, and it also helps shed a little bit of weight because it's 1 wire versus many output wires. Now you can solder the right angle pins onto the bottom of the board. Yes, have them on the bottom facing backwards where the USB cable goes. Now something you don't have to do but adds a nice touch is adding a buzzer to the NASI32. Now there's a couple of advantages to having a buzzer. One, you can set it up so that when you flip a switch on your radio, it turns into a lost model alarm, and it will continuously beep until you shut the switch off. Trust me, it really comes in handy, especially if you crash into a tree or some high grass. The beeping sound will help guide you to the aircraft. Another thing you can do is set it up so that when your board detects the battery voltage becoming too low, you can set it up so that it'll just start going off, letting you know that, hey, your battery's low. I personally don't set up that feature because I add a separate low voltage alarm that makes a much louder noise than what the NASI32 beeper can produce. And I'll show you how I set that one up later in the video. You can use any 5-volt buzzer, it really doesn't matter, but I use this one. Now it's going to come out the package all white. What I do to make it look nicer is just darken it with a black permanent marker. Then you just simply mesh wrap the wires and solder it onto the buzzer output of the NASI32. A good spot to place that buzzer is right here. Use some 3M double-sided sticky tape to secure it down. Now we can add the low voltage alarm. You can get them here at Hobby King. Make sure you choose the right version. There's a 3S one if you're running 3S or a 144S if you're running 4S. Simply solder the low voltage alarm right here to these tabs. Then secure it down with double-sided 3M sticky tape. Now is the time where you're going to want to run the ESC servo wires into the side slits of the power distribution board and then up through underneath where the NASI32 will be mounted. After you do that, it's time to put the bottom plate on and add the 4 screws to each of the arms and tighten them down. Now add the 4 standoffs where the NASI32 will be mounted. Now you can plug the ESC servo wires into the corresponding pins on the NASI32. But before you plug them in, if you haven't done so already, it's a good thing to calibrate the ESCs separately to the receiver you're going to use. Next, we're going to mount the board camera. I personally use the IR blocked version of this camera. This is a great camera to fly with. You can fly in daytime or nighttime, and you can also see sticks and twigs that are really small when you're flying through trees with it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is clip the outside border ring off. Now you can take your camera plate and hardware and start mounting the board camera to the camera plate. It is very important that you pay close attention about how you're mounting your camera to your camera plate. There should be no connections at the top of the board camera, and you should have the smallest connection on the right side of the board camera. If you don't pay attention, you can end up mounting your camera upside down or sideways. It should look just like this when you're finished. Now is the time we need to make cables to hook everything together. First you need to make a camera cable that goes from the camera to the Team Black Sheep core. Then you need to make a cable that goes from the video transmitter to the Team Black Sheep core. The plugs that go into the Team Black Sheep core ends are 1.25mm Molex connectors. They look like this. You can pretty much find them anywhere. Okay, now you need to follow this wiring diagram. You're not going to use the white wires, so don't worry about those. You're only going to have 3 wires: video, ground, and power. This side right here is the video transmitter side. This side right here is the camera side. And this is the RSSI output. You're only going to use this port if your receiver supports RSSI output. RSSI tells you how strong your radio signal strength is. If you use this port on the core will overlay your RSSI percentage so you can see how strong your radio signal strength is, if you're getting too far away or if it's perfectly fine. The core comes with an RSSI output cable. All you need to do is solder on the correct connection for your receiver on the other end. On my receiver, it happened to be a regular servo connector. Now you need to grab one of these SMA 10cm extension cables. All you need to do for this cable is just mesh wrap it. Then you're going to stick the end through the top plate. It should look just like this. Now you can install your camera and the additional 8 standoffs. Make sure not to forget that every time you add a standoff, you also need to add the black plastic washer in between the power distribution plate and the bottom plate. Now if you're wanting to run a GoPro, this is the time you need to install the vibration bobbins. Now is a good time to start connecting all the connectors to the Team Black Sheep core, video transmitter, and camera. Now is a good time to install your receiver connection from your NASI32 to the PPM port of your receiver. Next, you can connect your RSSI output cable from your receiver to the Team Black Sheep core. If your receiver doesn't have PPM, then you're going to have to use cables like this. Now you need to secure the Team Black Sheep core where the GPS hole is cut out. To do this, you add double-sided sticky tape to the front and back lower sections of the top plate of the Team Black Sheep core. Now you can add a small square piece of double-sided sticky tape to the top of the video transmitter and secure it to the bottom of the top plate. It should look something like this when you're done. Now you can feel free to tighten the top plate down with the 8 screws. You can also at this time add the prop adapters to the motors. Now you need to flip the aircraft over so that we can install the GoPro battery mount bottom plate. If you're using a diversity receiver, it's a good idea to stick one of your antennas right here like how I have mine. It stays protected by the GoPro battery plate. You don't have to put your receiver antenna there, I do. The reason is you're generally never going to go far enough away with the Mini to where the carbon fiber is going to decrease your range to anything that's actually going to affect you. Now you can add the 6 remaining screws to hold the bottom GoPro plate onto the bobbins. Now you can add your props on there. Make sure you balance your props before you put them on. You can also add these aluminum anodized lock nuts if you're looking for that extra bit of bling. And finally, the last part that you need to add to your aircraft is just the antenna. Simply screw it on. Something to note is that we've actually moved away from using the tall Fat Shark antennas. We've actually made our own custom short and stubby 5.8 GHz cloverleaf antennas. They're tuned, and also, since they're stubby, they don't get snagged on branches and stuff as much. And this concludes our How to Build a Blackout Hex video.
Congratulations!
I hope this video has made it easier for you to build your Blackout Mini Hex. If this video has helped you, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. Also, if you feel like donating some money in appreciation for me building this video for you guys, my PayPal address is in the description below. Every donation is much appreciated as I don't get paid for making any of these videos. Thank you. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe and visit my website, droneworksusa.net, for custom ready-to-fly aircraft.